man. Not another day like last Tuesday.
Cause it's Taco Tuesday.
Tuesday.
The big news.
Welcome to Tuesday Newsday, where our learning goal is to determine two or more central ideas of a text and analyze their development over the course of that text, including how they interact and build on one another. At the end of today's article, you will be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4. A 4 means that you can identify the central idea or ideas. You can point to the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, and you're able to look at how the ideas build on one another. That's above and beyond. A 3 is where we'd like all students to be by the end of the year. And if you can do that, that means that you are able to identify the central ideas. You're able to point to the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, but you're not really looking at how those ideas build on one another. If you're at a 2, that means that you can identify the central idea, but you're not able to identify the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, which is a lot like not showing your work in math. Not showing your work in math and just getting the answer doesn't tell your teacher, much in the same way that just identifying the central idea but not putting into the evidence doesn't tell me that you're getting the process. We need you to be able to prove that you can understand the process. I don't know if this is news to you or if you knew this all along, but school is not about getting the right answer. Never has been and never will be. The right answer is a byproduct of having good processing skills. If you can identify the process, if you can work through a problem, you have good problem solving skills, you've got good critical thinking skills, then the right answer comes as a result of that. So school is all about that process and identifying that evidence. So that's where you're at if you're at a 2. And a 1 means you are unsure of how to find the central idea of the text, which is okay. Please tell me if that's the case. That is quite helpful because it tells me what I can do differently as I'm working through the article, talking through it with you. That maybe I need to point out quotes. Maybe I need to talk about main idea building moves that the author makes. So know this. This 4-3-2-1 is a bit of an assessment of you, but it's just as much or more an assessment of me because it helps me understand how I can better teach this particular skill. To receive a unit and a half for today's lesson, you must highlight or underline the main idea, circle the evidence that the author uses to prove and support their point, and put a box around any other central ideas in the text. Hello and welcome to Tuesday Newsday number 33. What teenage brains can teach us about thinking creatively? Begins this way. They invent dances, coin slang, lead political movements, make bookstagrams, and draw millions of views to Minecraft and makeup streams. They learn second languages and sonatas from crammed city apartments and the finished payments of Exerbia. They generate colossal revenue on YouTube and iterate endlessly on TikTok, whose billion-plus users have helped make parent company ByteDance one of the world's most valuable startups. Why don't teenagers get more credit? For years, conventional wisdom regarded teens as little more than hormonal waterspouts swirling from one mishap to another. Then, advancements in neuroscience helped broaden our understanding of teen behavior. The public learned more about the research into the brain's prefrontal cortex, which regulates planning and decision-making and doesn't mature until about the age 25. This went a long way toward explaining adolescents' often impulsive behavior, but left adults more focused on the teenage brain's role in risk-taking rather than its role in learning and creating. That has frustrated some researchers. Oversimplified headlines and adults' obsession with teenage vulnerability have led to a fundamental misunderstanding of recent science, according to a sprawling report on adolescent development released in 2019 by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Several nonprofits funded the report, including the Bezos Family Foundation, run by the parents of Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos. The report is part of a growing effort by nonprofits, scientists, and policy scholars to reframe how different disciplines and the general public think about adolescence. It's true that the emotional and rational parts of teens' brains develop at different paces, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, researchers say. And fixating on the negatives overlooks the very opportunities that can help teens learn and grow. The fearlessness that concerns adults, said Adriana Galvin, director of UCLA's Developmental Neuroscience Laboratory, is exactly what makes adolescents thrive in the space of creativity and enacting social change. The teenage brain's characteristics, including its propensity for taking risks, are what prepare teenagers for adulthood and what lend them a sort of superpower in learning, skill acquisition, and creativity. Teenage brains are at a unique neurological stage. They retain much of the adaptability of childhood, building up new connections and pruning away unused ones. But they're also starting to gain the adult ability to think abstractly, envision the future, and make social connections, Galvin said. Although the prefrontal cortex remains important to adolescent neuroscience, Galvin said recent research has also focused on the regions that contribute to teenagers' socio-emotional development and the understanding that these regions don't develop in isolation. The prefrontal cortex, the social region, and other parts of the brain that are also building and refining new connections between each other, a process just as important as the maturation itself. In her research, for example, Galvin has examined the connection between the brain's striatum, a region associated with reward-seeking behavior, and the hippocampus, associated with learning and memory. Her work suggests that the connection is especially strong in teens and that adolescents are more likely than adults to learn from positive feedback. This could have implications for education, she said. If the adolescent brain is really good at learning from rewards, Galvin said, driving the kinds of thrill-seeking behaviors that otherwise put adults so on edge, we should leverage that to help them learn. Risks, in other words, don't have to be inherently harmful, said Joanna Lee Williams, an associate professor at the University of Virginia's Curry School of Education and Human Development, and a contributor to the National Academy's report. They can be healthy too, like deciding to join marching band. That doesn't mean lifting all limits on teenage behavior or waving away risks entirely, but parents and educators can start by understanding that not all risks are created equal. Williams and other researchers say some are crucial for learning and creating. Williams acknowledges that comes from a 30,000-foot vantage point. The report's findings won't apply to every spat between adults and teenagers, but generally, teens' sensitivity to rewards means that they might not simply ignore risks, but think of them in positive terms. Parents and educators can take advantage of that, helping them learn from mistakes rather than leaping straight to punishment. The adolescent brain doesn't develop in isolation, said Galvin, who also helped review the National Academy's report. It develops in families, it develops in systems, and it develops in different environments. Any of those components can change a teen's behavior for the better or worse. That's something youth advocates and educators have known for years. Williams said she has spoken with middle school educators whose concerns were more closer to the ground. What does the newer research mean for students in my school facing issues such as mental illness, family problems, racism, or economic disparity? Just because I believe in the promise of adolescence and adolescence as an age of opportunity, Williams said, does not mean that there aren't these huge, realistic challenges as well. She sees teens at the forefront of social movements, injecting energy and new ideas into public life. That has been the case throughout history, she said, and the newer developmental science explains why. She's proud and excited when she sees those changes, but not surprised. If more youth have this opportunity, she said, then of course we should expect these things. All right, and so here we are at the worksheet. I took care of a couple of things that are very basic, just meaning that you're taking it directly from the article itself. They don't quite require your own production of thought. That's identifying the topic where I wrote, we can learn about thinking creatively from teenagers. And then I wrote the first sentence, which says they invent dances, coin slang, leap political movements, make bookstagrams, and draw millions of views to Minecraft and makeup streams. And then the last sentence, if more youth have this opportunity, she said, then of course we should expect these things. What I want you to do right now is summarize the story in 12 words. And now summarize the story in 32 words. What is the main idea of the article? And now, to respond to the quote section. If more youth had this opportunity, she said, then of course we should expect these things. How does this quote support the main idea of the article? And the second quote, the fearlessness that concerns adults, said Adriana Galvin, director of UCLA's Developmental Neuroscience Laboratory, is exactly what makes adolescents thrive in the space of creativity and enacting social change. Why is this quote included in the story? Responding to this quote, if more youth had this opportunity, she said, then of course we should expect these things. Now, a little bit of a refresher of what that is in reference to. The last couple lines of the story says, just because I believe in the promise of adolescence, and adolescence is an age of opportunity, Williams said, does not mean that there aren't these huge realistic challenges as well. She sees teens as the forefront of social movements, injecting energy and new ideas into public life. That has been the case throughout history, she said, and the newer developmental science explains why. She's proud and excited when she sees those changes, but not surprised. If more youth had this opportunity, she said, then of course we should expect these things. So it's kind of saying teenagers definitely have value to what we would consider, adult life. Like, kind of, it used to be kids will be kids, adults will take care of the heavy lifting. Well, teens are more and more injecting themselves in that life, and their voices are being heard. Social media, I think, plays a factor in that too. But the point is that a lot of what's going on and in the development of the brain, they can inject, like it's saying, new energy in some of our old mindsets. So she's saying if more youth had this opportunity, then we would expect these things. So why does that quote matter to the main idea? The next quote says, the fearlessness that concerns adults, says Adriana Galvin, director of UCLA's Developmental Neuroscience Laboratory, is exactly what makes adolescents thrive in the space of creativity and enacting social change. So why is this quote included in the story? Well, we talk about the fearlessness, and the author did as well, that teenagers have. They're more apt to take risks, to be fearless. And that is concerning for adults. The worry is that teenagers don't take into account all of the trouble and the concerns and the things that can happen in a given situation, the consequences. But that's exactly what makes adolescents thrive in the space of creativity and enacting social change. They're willing to try. They're willing to take that risk. And on some level, risk taking is a good thing. So why would this quote be included in the story? Let's scroll up, take a look at the main idea. The main idea of the article is that because a teenage brain is still developing, it causes them to make poor choices, take risks, and do all the things that we associate with teenage behavior. But it also means that it's an untapped resource full of potential and positivity, and we need to leverage that. We need to take advantage of that, leverage meaning to take advantage of. And so, given that main idea, my first question is, what would you add to the main idea that I might have missed? What could you add to your main idea that you might have missed? And how, if at all, does your responses to these questions change based on the main idea that I presented here? And finally, here's the scale that you are working with, your ability to determine the central idea of a text. Are you at a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1? Also, give me one sentence as to why you rated yourself the way that you did. Once you answer this question and all the ones previous to this in the Edpuzzle, you have earned your unit and a half for today, and so ciao for now.